I had a call with him and we were talking for a bit, and he kind of just had a burst of emotion at one point of the conversation. So he was yelling, he was louder, and then he was just silent. And I remember in the moment, I didn't have the awareness of learning styles that I have now. But in that moment, because of the work we'd been doing in counseling, it was a lot easier for me to enter psychological listening and being a lot more grounded in that moment. And I just kind of let the silence happen. I just had like a gut feeling like this is what we need right now. We need to just sit in silence, which was huge because in the past, that sensitivity again, if someone was coming at me with a vibe or with this loudness and this anger, like I, in the past, could get super emotional in response. I would start judging the person. I would start getting really frustrated. And in previous conversations with my dad, that's what happened. I would just get frustrated. I would be like, what is wrong with him? Why can't he do this? Why doesn't he understand this? And we'd just kind of be stuck in this, both of us just kind of throwing a lot at each other and no one really listening, no one really being heard, and like nothing really would happen at the end of the day. But in this call with him, he had this emotional response to something I said. I kind of, instead of like getting worked up about that or immediately firing back with anger and getting scared or whatever.
I remember you very clearly saying to me, Faith, I heard innate wisdom. It was just coming through. That let him have his emotional outburst and then just sit with it for a while. So that was really telling to me when you said, I really heard innate wisdom coming through and I listened to it and I responded from innate wisdom. So you were in this calm, grounded state while he had resilient state, while he had this outburst, which you've experienced him having these outbursts many times. You guys have had these arguments many times where you come back from insecurity and you start arguing with them.
Yeah.
So instead of being triggered, instead of going into a conditioned response of arguing back with him, it just really stuck out for me when you said, I had this inner knowing. It just came through. Let him have this outburst and then let there be quiet afterwards. Could you talk more what happened after that?
And then I feel during that period of silence, I mean, I'm not like 100% sure what was going on inside of his head exactly, but it did feel like he took that silence as a moment to ground himself. And the next time someone spoke during our conversation, it was him. And he just kind of laid out a whole plan for what to do about the problem that we were talking about. It seemed to come through very naturally for him. He just said it. It was what I needed from him and what the whole point of our conversation was about.
And Ellie had been working on this, honestly, for months. Going back in, having another conversation, coming back, being frustrated and upset. And so it was that whole idea of being open to learning more, being open to realize more, and then being determined and going back and applying it again. And all of a sudden, in one live moment, it happened. It just naturally happened where I heard you say, because you were in this resilient, quiet state, it seemed like it gave him the space to tap into innate wisdom. Because like right after that, he lays out from a grounded place this plan, the thing you had been working on for months to accomplish and achieve. So this is two learning styles that are totally coming from different places, totally seeing from different places inside. It's not on purpose. It's innocent. They're missing where they're coming from. And from a social emotional place, Ellie, because she was coming from this resilient, more conscious place, she was unconditionally loving her father, which we hear a lot about unconditional love, but to actually allow it and experience it in live time, that's a whole different thing. Hello, welcome to Got Your Back podcast number 8. So glad you joined us. I am your host, Faith Escudero, licensed mental health counselor, licensed school psychologist, licensed special ed and elementary education teacher.
I'm your junior host, Ellie. I've been a client of mental health counseling, grounded in 3 principles psychology for 2 years now, and I'm finishing up my 5th and final year at Northeastern University.
Today, it's a segue from our anxiety series to a relationship series. And what made sense is to elaborate on some points that were made in the previous podcast. And that is judgment regarding things outside of our control, regarding our psychological self. How smart we are, how easily we pick up on academic subjects, just natural capabilities we've been born with psychologically. When we're talking about judgment, we're talking about using our power called thought in present time to subjectively call something good or bad. So, for example, we could subjectively call the hair that we've been given bad hair, or we could subjectively call the weather, whether it's cold, whether it's hot, whether it's somewhere in between, we could subjectively call it good weather. The opposite of that is we're just experiencing it as is. We're just understanding it as is. We're coming from this grounded, secure, clear feeling inside as we're experiencing that particular thing or as we're reflecting on that thing. Here's a very simple example. Blue is good. Blue is bad. That is using the power thought to create a subjective level of understanding about the color blue. And that's actually judging the color blue. We could say, this is blue, merely identifying the facts about the color, experiencing and understanding the color as is. Or we could be understanding more about the color blue or what we're about to use that color blue with or for.
Just like some quick examples, like I used to really dislike colors on me and clothing, and I would just kind of pretty blatantly just say, like, I don't like green, or I don't like how yellow looks on me. But as I've become more mentally healthy, I feel like one of the things that I've been noticing is that I'm just a lot more open to clothing, and I'm more open to seeing more like, could this yellow go really nicely with my skin tone, or could this yellow work really well with whatever else I have going on, or do I like this yellow top and does it fit me well? It's just kind of not just totally blocking myself off from experiencing a color because I decide I don't like it, and instead just being more adaptable and present and being curious. How does this color make me feel? Does it feel right to use in this moment? Does it make sense to use in this moment?
So what I hear before from a lower level of mental health, you would make these declarative statements, these absolute statements.
Yeah.
But while you were doing it, you were living in a more insecure feeling, less grounded feeling, and you would just automatically believe these declarative statements.
Yeah.
And then this would restrict you or bind you in the way you looked at colors or worked with colors. Now what I heard you saying is you'll ask questions more with an open mind. You'll allow yourself to experience new awareness in present time about that color in relation to your outfit.
I did have something else to say. Feel free to interject if it's on the right track or if there's more to understand about it. But I mentioned earlier asking questions like, does yellow look good with my skin tone? And I think, like, as I was saying that, a question kind of popped up in my head. Is it judgment to say that yellow does or does not look good with my skin tone? Or is that more of just a fact, and then I can decide independently how to respond to that fact?
Are you allowing yourself to psychologically see? Are you allowing that information to come through to realize it. And how you know that's happening is because it's the feeling inside is more secure and grounded. When we're using our operating system to think about it, to create a subjective level of understanding or draw conclusions, it's called an intellectual understanding, which is the opposite of it coming through and seeing it. Is the feeling inside is very different. You can feel when you're doing more thinking and when you're actually making up what the answers are. So the feeling could be more insecure. The feeling can be less grounded. The feeling could be more busy, or there's more work or seeking in finding the answer. So the feeling describes in the now how we're using our operating system, so that communicates where that answer is coming from inside. And it's either coming from we're making up things with our power called thought, and that's where we're doing a lot of thinking and believing and seeking or retrieving from memory, or it's actually just coming through in live time and we're psychologically seeing it. We're allowing mind to be open and we're allowing innate wisdom to come through, because that's where we can actually experience an objective level of awareness. That's the power of listening inside and becoming more aware. What am I doing inside in live time while I'm picking out my outfit, while I'm looking at colors, while I'm looking at myself in the mirror and deciding things about myself in the mirror.
Right. So like from a lower level of mental health or just awareness about judgment, I could just see the color yellow in one specific moment and decide, I hate how yellow looks on me, I'm never going to wear yellow again. Or I could just see it from an impersonal place, just like, this doesn't feel right now, but maybe also being open to the idea that yellow could make sense at another time.
And even with when you say feel right, you need to be kind of careful with that too. When we're just living at a lower level of consciousness and just going with the feeling a lot, it's so important to understand more from objective facts about the feeling inside. And then you're just much more grounded and clear what the feeling inside is communicating, instead of being so feeling driven.
Right.
A lot of times for me to clear it up, I say to myself, what is the right thing to do? And just really being open to listening to innate wisdom and trusting what it's communicating. So that is something that could be done maybe more concisely or simply when you're learning how to use your operating system inside more consciously.
I have noticed too, on the topic of picking out outfits, I've learned over the course of all of my counseling and therapy, once I feel myself start thinking a lot or like trying to justify or even feeling and getting carried away with elation and happiness, that's kind of a sign that I should maybe focus more on quieting inside and just listening to the feeling instead of kind of getting carried away with thinking a lot about what's going on.
That was a real turning point for me when I really started catching on, when I was going into a lot of thinking inside, much more aware about the power thought inside, that it is simply a thought that we're experiencing in live time, and just overusing or less consciously using that power inside in live time. I was having this problem at work, and I was getting ready for work in the morning. And I remember anticipating going into work, dealing with this problem. And while I'm in the bathroom, brushing my teeth and combing my hair, I'm going in overdrive with thinking, searching and seeking what is the answer for this problem at work. And because in one moment I decided to observe and notice inside, I started catching on the fast speed and the consistency with all the thinking going on. And all of a sudden it just clicked in my head, stop. That's not where the answer is going to come from. Because I wasn't necessarily living in an insecure feeling, but the feeling was communicating this busyness inside, this fastness inside, this lack of groundedness inside. And to actually catch on myself, I was just in overdrive with how I was using my power called thought. That was like a defining moment for me, where it was just like, okay, just trust you're going to see the answer. The answer's inside. It's going to come from innate wisdom. It's going to click in your head. Just leave it alone right now. Just leave the whole thing alone inside of your head. Really listening to that feeling and understanding it at greater levels of consciousness. The feeling inside is information. It's information about how you're using your operating system, because your operating system, it's all power. It's all made of power. Understand, power is a thing. It is an entity, but power itself is an intangible, invisible entity. And to start understanding at greater levels of awareness what power is and how it works. When we are psychological listening and we feel that grounded, secure, clear feeling inside, that's communicating the power is in its natural organic state. And when we pick up the power called thought, and that feeling inside starts changing and shifting, it's telling us how we're using that operating system, how we're using that power in current time. And so that feeling is providing information where we're seeing from. What is the validity of what we're seeing? Are we getting lost in what we're creating with that power? And the same thing is when we have a realization and that feeling elevates, or there's a click inside, it's communicating in those moments. We're seeing facts. Facts are coming through from innate wisdom inside. So it's really important to understand that feeling that we're living in. It's communicating how we're using our operating system, or where we're seeing from, or the validity of what it is we're experiencing inside. Judgment is a part of that. We can use that power called thought where we arbitrarily or subjectively start making up what is good and bad, but we use the operating system more consciously. We can clearly see from innate wisdom what is the right thing to do, what is the wrong thing to do. We see it, we experience it, and that's when we know from facts, that's good, that's bad. So it's really listening to feeling and understanding when it's a subjective level of understanding and when it's an objective level of understanding. Grounding yourself inside about these things to understand about life and oneself. And that's becoming psychologically independent. We've been built a certain way by nature. And to understand more from facts about that, because that is out of our control. The way nature built us psychologically is out of our control. And to use our operating system more consciously, where we don't judge those things subjectively as good or bad, but we start understanding them objectively as far as what are assets, what are things that we can develop more strengths regarding those psychological capabilities. Ellie, you talked about from a lower level of mental health, how you were experiencing and understanding that psychological capability called sensitivity. Can you start elaborating on that?
Yeah, for sure. So the thing that really comes to mind when we talk about sensitivity and how I used to view sensitivity, I'll just paint an example. If I saw a friend I could easily pick up on that their vibe is off or something was shifting in them. For whatever reason, they were in a lower mood. And before I started learning about sensitivity and these capabilities, I would usually take that vibe that I pick up from them and just start thinking a lot about it. I would start making up ideas and thinking a lot that, it's a personal thing. They're specifically mad at me. Their tone was pointed or something when they were talking to me. Like, I would immediately just get insecure and start getting really worked up about what they're doing and how they're talking to me, and just kind of put myself into this like emotional mess. And I remember also just getting told by family members and stuff I was too sensitive. Someone would make a joke or say something directed at me, and I would just get super, super emotional about it. I would start getting really upset or angry.
So there was this potential inherent psychological capability called sensitivity. But then you would use your operating system less consciously, where you would go into judgment about what you were picking up through that potential psychological capability.
Yeah.
Or others around you would go into judgment regarding that potential psychological capability called sensitivity. So from a lower level of mental health, this potential psychological capability called sensitivity was becoming a weakness. It was becoming a burden. It wasn't really being understood from facts by you or the people around you.
Yeah, I definitely viewed sensitivity as, because I remember like the first time you brought it up to me, this idea of sensitivity and that I am a sensitive person. My immediate thought was sensitivity is a bad thing. It's a weakness. It means that, I can't handle the heat or can't deal with little things and read into things too much, and I like overthink a bunch. But I think learning more about sensitivity, it's kind of had like a multifaceted effect on my life. And we can talk more about sensitivity and get more detailed about it, but just generally speaking, I feel it's allowed me to have healthier friendships and relationships. It's helped me feel more secure in myself and more comfortable in my abilities. It's helped me like reduce a lot of stress that I would feel. I just overall like feel more secure, I guess.
So what you're talking about right now, what you're painting a picture of, is cultivating greater levels of mental health. You now see and understand this potential psychological capability inside of you called sensitivity from new levels of understanding. You have had realizations about it. And so now your relationship with this psychological capability is coming more from realizations, from objective levels of understanding, a more secure, clear sense of self. How that started was when I was using my mind consciously, I could pick up you inherently had this capability.
Yeah. Could we talk a little bit about what sensitivity is from like a more conscious perspective?
In this case, when we're using the word sensitivity, there's these built-in sensors psychologically, and these smaller, subtler things become more apparent more easily, more quickly, that are happening within the context. So for example, when you're talking about feeling a vibe, those are sensors inside of you where you're more tuned into the energy around you. But then there is understanding at greater levels of mental health how to respond to that or what that is, where it becomes that natural psychological capability you were born with that you have no control over. It now becomes a strength. It now becomes an asset where the way you read the environment just totally changes. I would talk to you from objective levels of understanding about sensitivity. In this case, these sensors that are built inside, you just naturally like pick up on different things in the environment. It could be you pick up on sounds. physical sounds I'm talking about, or you pick up on an energy change from another person or the environment. When we use our mind consciously, that really can keep a person safe, and it really can help them to, for example, you talked about picking up a vibe change with your romantic partner. With an open mind, picked up on this feeling that changed, this energy, and from common sense said to your romantic partner, what's going on right now? Are you okay?
Yeah.
Do you want to elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, what was coming to mind is just like how much of a change that was for me to be able to pick up on that vibe and just translate that understanding into a question or just into curiosity. Because in the past, I mentioned before with that example earlier, if I did detect a vibe change in someone, body language was communicating something, I would just go into thinking and just they're mad at me or something's wrong or something's up. And that would really affect how I communicated with them. I would either kind of recoil back, be afraid of talking to them, or just internalize and think a lot and make a lot of assumptions about how they're feeling and what they're doing.
This is where the phrase social emotional awareness comes from, because emotionally, you were using your operating system to see from insecurity, to see from a lower level of awareness, and really you were innocently using it to judge, this is bad, what's going on right now is bad. From that lower level of understanding, that lower level of internal emotional understanding, that then led you to less effectively cultivate or navigate the relationship in those moments, which that's the social aspect of emotional social understanding or emotional social skills. So it first started inside of you, how you were perceiving it and understanding it. And then it led to your actions, your decisions, your behaviors, to how you navigated the relationship. And this is where there would start being problems within the relationship, because what you were understanding wasn't the facts about what was going on. So for you to develop more mental health where you understood this capability inside, and then from there, just very simply use your operating system to ask versus create a lot of judgmental thinking in your head. You're now navigating and developing the relationship in a much more conscious way. And you're inviting emotional intimacy or emotional connection in those moments. So it sounds like a small thing, but it's actually like a really big thing.
Yeah, I'm curious too, like, could we maybe just briefly talk about or just address some other capabilities that people have? I feel like that could be kind of helpful.
Understand learning. That's something we do inside. That's invisible. That's increasing one's awareness about anything. It could be increasing one's awareness about an academic subject. It could be increasing one's awareness about relationships, or it could be increasing awareness about a sport or how an engine works in a car. Increasing one's awareness by using one's mind more consciously. That's a whole different separate aspect of learning. But then there's also increasing awareness as far as how one's brain is built, which the brain is a biological structure. And quite frankly, the brain can be metaphorically compared to a computer, because that also is a physical structure and works a particular way. So when we look at learning only in the respect of the brain and the way the brain is built, one is a more language dominated learning style or more left brain dominated learning style. And then there is a more right brain dominated learning style, which is called a visual spatial learning style. Now, these are only two learning styles, but they tend to be, in general, predominant learning styles, and yet they're very, very different. typical professions these learning styles have a tendency to go into, just to understand a little more about the learning styles. So someone who is more left brain dominated, more language dominated, they're the individuals who tend to become lawyers, or they tend to become journalists or storytellers or poets. Historians can be more left brain learning styles, editors, technical writers. When we're talking about right brain learning styles, typically individuals that their brain is built in this way, where they're more visual spatial, typical professions they can gravitate to are architects, where they're actually developing a plan of a building. They are creating that building in real time. Engineers, interior designers, creators of clothing, electricians, mechanics. It can be pilots. Also, typically, your painters, your sculptors, building and creating and decorating cakes. Organizers, you hear of like apartment organizers. They can be very visual spatial. Then there's actually breaking down just some basic strengths and weaknesses within these learning styles. So people that are more left brain dominated, as far as their learning style goes, that are more language dominated, they can start speaking words, whole sentences at a very young age. They just really enjoy the process of writing. So they just have this natural ability to communicate what they're thinking and feeling or understanding. A weakness can be with a left brain dominated learner is it's in their best interest to become better listeners, better receivers, because they have such a facility with language. Sometimes they can be too language dependent in situations to understand them. They also can be very detail focused. So Ellie pointed out, when you look at our notes, our note-taking styles, hers is very list-oriented, and it's just very detail-oriented. It actually looks really neat, what she writes, and orderly. Where you look at my notes, because I'm more right brain dominated, I have outlines, I have diagrams, I have a lot of highlighting, I have arrows going to places. So I actually create pictures with words to organize when I write something down. The other way to look at it is, if I had a picture in front of me and it's a whole picture, a left brain learner, it's going to be more like you get a flashlight and you shine on a part of that picture. That's where the left brain learner has a tendency to go, is they go to this particular piece and they get very detail focused. The big picture, it won't be in their awareness, or the patterns within the picture. When you talk about a right brain learner with that whole picture, they're going to see the big picture. They're going to see the pattern within it. And if you shine a flashlight up on a part of that picture where it's looking at specific details, it's not going to be in their awareness. They're not going to see it. They're going to have more of a tendency to miss a detail here, a detail there. So for example, if the date is like June 16th, they'll maybe see June 6th and they'll miss the one in there. So right brain learners, they can have a tendency to maybe speak less and listen more. They can actually become very great observers and like comprehend things inside their head. They can have a tougher time with actually articulating really clearly what they're thinking and feeling inside. That's a person who will start building their notes or what they're understanding within an Excel sheet.
Yeah, I did have some things that kind of came up in my mind when we were talking about this. And I'm still trying to like find the exact words for it. So I'm just gonna start speaking. And then let me know if there's anything I can elaborate on. But while we were talking about learning styles, I feel like it's partially conventional wisdom to kind of see these learning styles as barriers, I guess, where it's like, so I'm a left brain learner, and I definitely know I struggle a lot with seeing the big picture things. I definitely focus very intensely on details. And part of my counseling right now is about kind of developing the skills to see the big picture. And I also am aware of people that seem to just have capabilities with a wide range of subjects. So it's, they're good writers, they're good mathematicians / engineers, or at least like they seem to be from my understanding. And I guess I'm just like curious about what kind of mindsets it's in our best interest to have around learning styles. How do we kind of cultivate skills that maybe don't come as naturally to us? If they're like, how do people seem to be able to learn a bunch of different things in and out of their learning style?
There's been this tendency, if something is easier or more enjoyable, people have a tendency to gravitate to that thing more.
Okay.
And so say, for example, math doesn't come so easy to me. And I have a math class and I've got to do the homework and I need to pass the class. I mean, it's all in our best interest to have a level of functionality with math. There's a purpose for numbers in our life. It's just a practical thing. So instead of going in with the mindset, this is too hard, or I can't do this, which is all using your power called thought to create subjective judgment around math and my ability to do math. Instead, having just an open mind and saying, there's a good reason school thinks I need to learn math. There's a good reason for me to learn math.
Can understanding your learning style also help you understand how to best learn math?
That can be very helpful. Going to school for educational psychology, school psychology, really helped open the door for me to understand at greater levels what learning styles were. When I was a school psychologist in the public schools, it was almost like I was the learning doctor or detective in the school. So when there was students struggling to learn something, or the teacher was metaphorically pulling their hair out to help the student understand something, that's usually when I got called in. Or even the parent. The parent could initiate the process because the parent might metaphorically be at their wit's end with their child's homework or their grades or something of that nature in regard to academic studies. So they would knock on my door or call me in and say, Faith, can you come in and help us out? What is going on here? So it was my body of knowledge around learning and learning styles and more of the details around how we take in and receive information and then we convey it to the world, that I could go in there with an open mind and start seeing, oh, this student has this learning style. It would be helpful for them to be taught in these ways. I write reports on it and make these recommendations. It's really about increasing one's awareness how to learn it. When it's younger students, let's say elementary, even partially middle school, it's really up to the teachers and the parents and the staff, the administrative staff, to learn these things. When the student is becoming older, we're talking later phases of middle school, high school, college, well, then it's really incumbent upon the student to learn it themselves. Because number one, they're more capable cognitively. Their level of development allows it more, but it's also them understanding themselves as they're going through these different learning situations. But to go back to your original question, it's really learning to have an open mind and saying, there is some way for me to learn this. Where do I begin? where do I begin in learning this? What are the best steps for me to take to learn this? And that might need to keep happening along different junctures of learning the academic knowledge. Okay, where do I begin now? What do I need to learn now? But it's that trusting state of mind, I can learn it. It's that open state of mind, it's important for me to learn, instead of that subjective level of awareness, this is boring, or this is dumb, or I don't need to learn this, or I can't learn this, I'm not smart enough to learn this. A lot of people, when they've had experiences with learning at early ages, they can develop a mindset as soon as they encounter that subject or that material to go right into an ugh mindset, like, I got to do this. Oh, I can't stand doing this. What they're choosing to do innocently is the culmination of their past experiences. They're developing a mindset where it's a closed state of mind or a frustrated state of mind as soon as they see the material. And that's going to be the ultimate barrier at that time in learning those particular skills.
Yeah. I just kind of had a realization as you were talking about, there's these two people in my life that I'm thinking of right now. And one is a left brain learner, a super great writer, but she's also super talented at math. And then I have another right brain learner I know, and he's a excellent engineer, but also a really good writer. And what I was kind of noticing as you were talking is I've never heard either of them complain about a class. I've never heard the engineer would never take a writing class and say, like, oh my God, I hate this. In fact, he would actually initiate taking writing classes and being open to learning about that whole area of knowledge. And then my other left brain learner friend, I think she just has a very open mindset and is really in tune with her curiosity and is just super independently able to learn these things. And I think that's it really does just come down to mindset and understanding, I guess, what you need to learn.
So what you're describing is these two individuals and being open to learning and enjoying learning, whatever it was. The first step is just choosing to be interested in whatever's coming your way. And that's just an open state of mind. And that is with your free will, making a decision in live time to simply be interested, whether it's something someone is saying, or the weather in present time, or this new class that looks almost impossible. Just simply being interested, what are they going to teach, or how is this going to work out? Or someone is talking to you about some difficult circumstance where you made this terrible mistake. Just simply being interested in understanding where they're coming from or what you did that resulted in that mistake. So it's a very simple state of mind to choose, just the desire to understand, just to be interested. And you're already allowing this very healthy state of mind, an open state of mind. You're allowing yourself to connect or see from innate wisdom. Things in general are just going to go better. They're just because of how you're choosing to use your operating system inside. You brought up a really wonderful example of being in a circumstance you had been in so many times before that did not go well. And so having historically this experience of this repetitive live event, and you used to talk about being so frustrated and why can't my parents just understand and give me what I need? And it was over many different moments of you coming back, us talking about it, reflecting on it more, you being willing to understand more and willing to go back into the situation, that all of a sudden in one live moment, you had a whole different experience in that situation. So could you please elaborate on that example for our listeners?
Yeah, so this is about a situation with my dad where I was just trying to receive support from him. And it's important to lay out, as Faith and I have talked about it, I've realized that my dad has a right brain learning style. As Faith mentioned before, that comes with words don't come as easily. You mentioned before, Faith, that it can even like lead to some more emotional behaviors just when you're
When
at
the
like a
words
loss for
don't come,
words.
you can get really emotional.
Yeah, and I'm obviously left-brained, can be very detail-oriented, very focused in on, especially in like arguments or debates, can get super kind of stuck in one detail and trying to, break down a point and build a case or whatever.
I also want to point out to our listeners, this is all relatively new awareness that is happening inside of you. So that
Yeah.
you're able to describe this much now, this is very new, which I was like so happy for her that it happened because all the work she put into it, and she's having this new experience instead of being triggered, instead of being frustrated and fed up. Like she's learning more what she's capable of inside. And on top of that, she has this breakthrough with her father. So I just wanted to separate. At that time, she was
Yeah.
living at a very different level of awareness. And it's only recently she's starting to realize, oh, this is my father's learning style. Oh, this is why he did this. So if you could specifically talk about like what happened at that time. And
Yeah, so in the moment, our focus in counseling was more so just about, for me, how to stay grounded when I'm having difficult conversations, staying clear and actually just like seeing the big picture of the conversation. So I had a call with him and we were talking for a bit, and he kind of just had a burst of emotion at one point of the conversation. So he was yelling, he was louder, and then he was just silent. And I remember in the moment, I didn't have the awareness of learning styles that I have now. But in that moment, because of the work we'd been doing in counseling, it was a lot easier for me to enter psychological listening and being a lot more grounded in that moment. And I just kind of let the silence happen. I just had like a gut feeling like this is what we need right now. We need to just sit in silence, which was huge because in the past, that sensitivity again, if someone was coming at me with a vibe or with this loudness and this anger, like I, in the past, could get super emotional in response. I would start judging the person. I would start getting really frustrated. And in previous conversations with my dad, that's what happened. I would just get frustrated. I would be like, what is wrong with him? Why can't he do this? Why doesn't he understand this? And we'd just kind of be stuck in this, both of us just kind of throwing a lot at each other and no one really listening, no one really being heard, and like nothing really would happen at the end of the day. But in this call with him, he had this emotional response to something I said. I kind of, instead of like getting worked up about that or immediately firing back with anger and getting scared or whatever.
I remember you very clearly saying to me, Faith, I heard innate wisdom. It was just coming through. That let him have his emotional outburst and then just sit with it for a while. So that was really telling to me when you said, I really heard innate wisdom coming through and I listened to it and I responded from innate wisdom. So you were in this calm, grounded state while he had resilient state, while he had this outburst, which you've experienced him having these outbursts many times. You guys have had these arguments many times where you come back from insecurity and you start arguing with them.
Yeah.
So instead of being triggered, instead of going into a conditioned response of arguing back with him, it just really stuck out for me when you said, I had this inner knowing. It just came through. Let him have this outburst and then let there be quiet afterwards. Could you talk more what happened after that?
And then I feel during that period of silence, I mean, I'm not like 100% sure what was going on inside of his head exactly, but it did feel like he took that silence as a moment to ground himself. And the next time someone spoke during our conversation, it was him. And he just kind of laid out a whole plan for what to do about the problem that we were talking about. It seemed to come through very naturally for him. He just said it. It was what I needed from him and what the whole point of our conversation was about.
And Ellie had been working on this honestly for months. going back in, having another conversation, coming back, being frustrated and upset. And so it was that whole idea of being open to learning more, being open to realize more, and then being determined and going back and applying it again. And all of a sudden, in one live moment, it happened. It just naturally happened where I heard you say, because you were in this resilient, quiet state, it seemed like it gave him the space to tap into innate wisdom. Because like right after that, he lays out from a grounded place this plan, the thing you had been working on for months to accomplish and achieve. So this is two learning styles that are totally coming from different places, totally seeing from different places inside. It's not on purpose. It's innocent. They're missing where they're coming from. And from a social emotional place, Ellie, because she was coming from this resilient, more conscious place, she was unconditionally loving her father, which we hear a lot about unconditional love, but to actually allow it and experience it in live time, that's a whole different thing. And so could you elaborate a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think another thing I wanted to bring up too was, and I kind of honestly had a mini realization about more details about the story as you were talking, but a little bit after this phone call, we ran into another related issue. And I think, Faith, you recommended making him an Excel sheet that just laid out the details in a very organized, numerical, visual way. And you were saying mostly where that was coming from was that would resonate more with his learning style. Because again, he is an engineer, a very number-based person. But I was realizing just now that throughout my whole life, he's always made Excel sheets for stuff with allowance. And there's this one childhood memory where I broke a window and we set up like a plan for how I would pay for the window repair. That's another story for another time. But it just kind of came back to me like how many times he was showing me the best way for him to understand and lay out information. And from where I was seeing it, like I just wasn't picking up on that until we started having these conversations about learning styles, and you recommended making him an Excel sheet, and it kind of all clicked. Oh, like these lists that I was sending him that were very like my learning style weren't resonating. Because, we'd have conversations where he would just miss a detail or something would just be totally missed. And a lot of that I'm understanding now was because I wasn't being very open to him, I guess. I was more so focused on how I wanted to lay out the information and how I felt it was right to organize that information, and then getting frustrated with him based off how he was responding or that he wasn't on the same page as me. But I'm definitely seeing now like it's not really about what I want in these kinds of things when you're working through it with someone. It's not about my judgments and my beliefs on what is the best way to do something.
So what you're pointing out right now is at a lower level of consciousness, at a lower level of mental health, what you saw naturally was more of a me focus, a personal focus. It's more about me and how I see it, what I need and what I believe. And now from a greater level of consciousness, through using your mind more consciously, through having realizations, you're now seeing how to connect with the other person, how to work with the other person. It's much more a we thing and a relationship thing. And that ability to see all of that really comes from cultivating greater levels of consciousness inside. People can talk to you about it, and you can be intelligent enough to understand what they're saying, but to actually see these facts, this knowledge inside of your own head, that's actually cultivating new levels of consciousness inside. And when you have realizations, you actually see, you actually experience the facts, and it becomes a part of you. And your whole sense of self it just shifts, it just changes. It's just so much more grounded and developed. Life is about moments, and this is such a priceless moment for you to experience with your father and for you to start understanding at new levels of consciousness where he was really coming from or is coming from, and that you're starting to see more and appreciate, just naturally appreciate more the work he puts into things or has put into things. And that is such a healing thing, both inside of you and within your relationship with your father.
His outburst, I think I also wanted to point out, just to kind of like tie the learning styles back into it. When he had that response, I wasn't judging that he didn't have the words to say or address exactly what I was saying. I didn't judge how long it might have taken him to respond, where I feel like in the past I've been very judgmental about how people speak, and it was just that whole idea of needing a conversation to kind of be on my terms. They had to structure what they were saying exactly around how I wanted it or how I was doing it, and just have a lot of expectations for what communication should look like.
What you're saying is so incredibly important, because one of the problems that's been going on in the world, according to my understanding as a licensed school psychologist and having a deep level of awareness about learning styles and memory and the whole learning processes inside, is that innocently, at a lower level of consciousness, language dominated or left brain dominated learners, honestly, it's in their best interest for them to invest more into becoming better and better listeners. And for more right brain dominated learners, which are visual spatial learners, it's in their best interest to invest more consciously in developing their language skills. It's about people developing more rounded skills, because it's about people meeting each other where they're at. This is one thing to understand about using the mind more consciously. There's a whole lot more to learn about listening, the importance of listening. And we have been practicing that, getting glimpses of that with psychological listening. But listening is a really essential skill for us all to really invest in at greater levels for many reasons. For example, we experience less stress. In those moments, the more you psychologically listened to your father, you were very resilient when he exploded. You didn't experience any trauma or resentment or hurt or stress. So you were tapping into a natural capability you're able to do with your mind, where from that place you can make more conscious decisions to keep yourself safe or to navigate the relationship. In the field of psychology, a person can go into separate aspects of psychology to study. So typically, greater levels of understanding about social emotional development inside of a person can be called more clinical psychology. And that's where mental health counselors can specialize in that aspect of psychology. Then there's the aspect of psychology called school psychology or educational psychology, and that's when psychologists really specialize in the aspect of learning and all. There's actually a lot to learn about learning. So when you go to a mental health counselor or you go to a psychologist, what they've actually studied is going to be their area of expertise. They can help you to understand about yourself. In this case, because I started out, well, first it was actually special education, which was disabilities, biological disabilities, psychological disabilities. And then I went into a 3-year program in school psychology, and then eventually extended that to aspects of clinical psychology. when you went into mental health counseling, Ellie, you had the ability to learn a little bit, at least a little bit about each of these areas inside of yourself. So that's just something to keep in mind when you're going to someone for help with learning or someone for help with trauma, that there's different areas that the provider specializes in, and you will really want to be more aware what it is they specialize in so you can hone in on what aspect inside it's in your best interest to become more aware about. So your thoughts on that, Ellie?
Yeah, because I remember when I first started counseling, like learning was a huge topic on my mind. That might have been like one of the first things that I mentioned as being a concern, because I was in an engineering program that definitely was not something that came naturally to me, and struggled a lot with it. And I think having this new understanding about learning styles and being able to be guided in understanding how my brain works, and also just recognize more of the capabilities that I have inside instead of judging them as harshly as I was before, it's just been a really empowering and enabling experience. Because I did come into therapy, I always struggled with math and I always gravitated more towards writing, but I would just do so much thinking into I'm stupid because I can't do this, or I can't do, or I don't seem to be able to pick up math as easily as other kids, or I would just completely disvalue any interest or ability I had in writing. And I feel like that's been a thing that held me back, I feel, or has been holding me back in the past from just developing a much better relationship with myself and just the people in my life too.
When we are needing a greater sense of self, when we are needing new levels of consciousness inside, new levels of mental health inside, or it's even our best interest to cultivate it or invest in it, it can be an intermingling of different pieces of our psychological self that we really need to understand. When I initially spoke with you, was I could feel the clinical part, the depression. I could feel the devaluing of yourself, or I could feel the emotional turmoil and the suffering that was going on inside. But that was like intermingling with your lack of understanding about your ability to learn or how you learn. So when first working with someone, it's the provider, the mental health counselor, that really needs to have more and more clarity what is going on inside of the patient, the client. And then it's this simple, best way, optimal way, how to start approaching these entangled issues that are going on inside. Because I also understood for you another part was the whole relationship part, the friendship part, the romantic partner, because you had a lot of value in your relationships and how more complicated they were or how to approach them. So there was a number of important things that were going on at the same time. Some of it was the clinical piece, the mental illness piece, the social emotional, cultivating more social emotional knowledge inside. And then there was also the learning piece. And it was more relevant for you because you're completing your college degree. You chose this particular major. You're struggling with these classes. So when someone goes into therapy or mental health counseling, there's typically a lot more things going on that meets the eye, and it's the therapist really developing greater and greater levels of understanding what is going on, and then methodically, piece by piece, looking at them. But it's also the patient really deciding to invest, to learn, and apply this outside of mental health counseling sessions, because I want to also highlight, while we're touching upon this, that that was one thing that stood out for me with you, Ellie, was that when I would give the littlest tidbit, it was amazing to me how between appointments you were already applying that thing, and you would come back and you would very simply state, this is what I did. And I honestly, it was just like amazing to me. It was almost like a horse or an animal who's finally getting water that has been so thirsty for so long. That was also another very important piece to how much progress you have made.
Yeah, I'll definitely speak kind of on my side of the client-provider relationship, because we've talked a little bit before about how I've had other therapists in the past, but all of that therapy, it was very just, I would talk and they would say like a few things, some advice kind of, and that would be it. But the thing that really stuck out to me when I first started therapy with you, Faith, just to be clear, like my mindset about therapy at the time, I was very pessimistic about it. I had like a very negative mindset. I was just, whatever, it'll just be another place for me to vent or whatever. But the thing that really stuck out to me is in our first few appointments, you were always very direct with me. You were always just very open and willing to just tell me if I was, or ask me if I was doing something. Because in those moments when we first started therapy, I was still in the habit of drinking and staying up super late on weekdays and not taking great care of my body. And I would show up to our appointments like very tired, and I'd be very distracted and kind of looking around. And I do remember you always just like directly asking me like, what is going on? And kind of communicating very clearly like, that until I start taking better care of myself, it was going to be very difficult, if not impossible even, for me to really experience more health. That's just like one of the things that I think was so unique about your specific skill set and this understanding of 3 principle psychology. And I think why it resonated so much to me, because it was just like, as you were saying, a glass of refreshing water after spending so much of my life like thinking one way and having one kind of judgment around mental health and myself and what I was capable of.
It's really how one another is willing to understand one another, how one another's willing to listen, be open, because the provider has absolutely no control over how the patient is going to respond or how much healing the patient is going to do. And the patient has no control over what the provider is going to say or what kind of assistance they're going to provide or support or knowledge. And honestly, it's going deeper and deeper into this approach that over time, I've overcome conditioned habits that I had. And one conditioned habit I was raised, which I'm sure there's listeners out there that can relate to this, but when I was being raised, innocently inside my mother's head, she had an idea about how females should act. And so a lot of times, on top of having a right brain learning style where language was already evasive to me in so many ways, she would innocently, from a lower level awareness, teach me social emotional skills where girls need to keep their mouth closed and not speak or hurt other people's feelings. So this was a double whammy for me language-wise, where I was more and more quiet and wouldn't say things. So over time, learning this approach, there was literally times where I heard myself speaking inside, but I wouldn't say any words. And I consciously was learning to overcome this conditioned habit and actually speak in live time the words that were inside. And it was a lot of work, determination, commitment. So in live time to say to you, Ellie, what's going on? You don't seem to be paying attention. That was something I cultivated and was able to naturally do with greater levels of consciousness inside, unlearning these conditioned habits that I had developed over time. The other piece to that was by realizing the essential points of this approach over time, getting glimpses here and there, I started understanding at greater levels what presence was, the power of the now. And so from greater levels of consciousness, I was very much in the now with you, and I would notice more subtle behaviors, such as your eyes shifting and going from one object to the next, or grimaces on your face. And that's information. That's thinking that's going on inside. And so in live time, to say to you, I'm noticing something that's going on. Where are you at? What is going on? That also was levels of consciousness that was cultivated regarding this approach and using my mind more consciously. The man who uncovered the three principles, who is the originator of three principles psychology, his name is Sydney Banks. And he uncovered this understanding in the 70s, the year 2000 when I first heard him speak. But he would talk about the health of the helper. He would talk about how that was one of the essential aspects of this psychological understanding, these leading edge psychological facts. And he would talk about you can only give away what you yourself understand. And so it's been over the years, learning to use my mind more consciously, that I have been able to understand more within my patient and be able to give more what they need. And so that's part of the thing you were talking about as far as me being so direct or asking you questions or picking up on things. Yeah. And that's really made a difference actually with how I help clients to heal or experience greater levels of consciousness.
Yeah, I guess this whole episode, I think the thing that's really stuck out to me is just how much your relationships can flourish when you just commit more to understanding mental health and cultivating more levels of understanding about stuff. Because, I mean, I feel like we covered a bunch of relationships today. Your relationship with yourself, parent and child, between romantic partners, between patients and doctors. And I feel like a common thread that we really highlighted throughout this whole episode and this whole series is just how much anxiety and judgment and expectations and all this thinking can prevent us from connecting with people, understanding people, being able to reach our fullest potential or do the right thing in a moment. I just think that's, at least for me and what I've seen in my life, that's been an invaluable thing.
The most important part of that, which we've touched upon with these examples, is connecting more with that essential capability inside called innate wisdom, which is your authentic self, which is your ultimate capability to learn and realize and navigate in a way that feels right and true to yourself. And you just keep evolving as a human being inside. We're going to close out this 8th podcast of Got Your Back series. We really hope that you're enjoying this and that it's relevant to you and that it's increasing your awareness in areas that is useful to you. We will begin our relationship series with podcast number 9. Until then, I am your host, Faith Escudero.
I'm your junior host, Ellie.
And until the next podcast, bye for now.